Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to this week's edition of Artist Alchemy. I'm David Reed, Executive Director of the YubaSutter Arts Council. Very, very proud to have with us this afternoon our professional violinist friend, a frequent collaborator, Mr. Andrew Sords, and conductor of the North State Symphony, Mr. Scott Seaton. Welcome, gentlemen.
Great to be here. Nice to see you,
Thanks
David.
for having us, David.
Oh, well, we've been trying to get you back in person, and we're still working on it. And that will happen in our lifetimes, I promise. So there you have it. Scout's honor. Well, that's my left hand, right hand.
We have to have live performances first.
Yeah, yeah, it's a progressive kind of thing, don't we know? I should point out that Andrew has joined us live from Chagrin Falls, Ohio, just outside Cleveland. And Scott's with us from home in Monterey. So great to see you. That's one of the advantages of these virtual events. But as we all know, ain't nothing like the real thing.
Yeah,
it's not the truth.
So we're here today to talk about food, fashion, hairstyles. But it's all about music today. But we can digress at any point, gentlemen. I want to point out too that I owe you all a huge debt of gratitude because I'm kind of new to this virtual interviewing thing, and you all have just done this so many times. And I feel like so much of what I've learned about interviewing musicians, I learned from our two guests today. In fact, I want to show you a clip from one of their early training videos about on-camera decorum.
Oh, boy.
And stay focused. Alex, could you just run that video for us real quick? This is how it all began. This is so
Oh, my goodness.
Just to show you the style and tempo.
3, 2, 1.
As I was saying.
Hi, I'm Scott Seaton, Music Director for the North State Symphony. Enjoy. When you're ready. Hi, I'm Scott Seaton, Music Director for the North State Symphony Orchestra. And let's do it again.
I sound like I'm 12.
Right now with the orchestra. Hi, I'm Scott Seaton, Music Director for the North State Symphony. Joining me today is Andrew Sords, world-famous violinist, who is joining us this weekend for our concerts. Andrew, where'd you come from?
I flew in today from Los Angeles, but my hometown is Cleveland, Ohio. I am so thrilled to be in North.
There's the F-bomb we were waiting for. All right, thank you, Alex. You get the general gist of it. These are, fun folks, and I do appreciate that early training. That anything goes as long as you're having fun, right? You all have done.
I think those bloopers are going to follow us forever, Scott.
They are. What's funny is when I edited those together, I was like, how do I, censor a word? So I was like, boop. I'll just record
and
over.
I gave you a wealth of material that day.
It was just so fun, so fun. We thought of that the other day. I said, we have to somehow work that in. So thanks for humoring me. It is really so great to see you both. We miss you here in Yuba Sutter. I should point out, I first met our two guests when you performed here locally together with our own Viridian Symphony Orchestra. That was back in, I think, May of 2017. And you were performing the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto. And by the way, you were both fabulous house guests, and nothing like volunteering. I was voluntold, actually, you will be hosting this guy, Andrew, and this other fellow, Scott, because they're going to be in town. I said, okay, fine, we're open. We got plenty of room. And anyway, it's created a great bond, and we just have so enjoyed knowing you and following you on Facebook, and every once in a while actually getting to see you. So talk about each in your own ways, your lives during this COVID time. We know so much has changed and been canceled. And how are you dealing? How are you coping? Who's first?
I'll go. It's fine. I'm coping any possible way that I can to distract me from the inability to make music in person with my wonderful colleagues, Andrew included. And, it's been a long, how many months now? It's most of March, April, May, June. So almost 4 whole months now without being in front of an orchestra, and for a conductor, who already doesn't spend enough time, in front of people making music. It's mostly in our head anyway, studying scores. It's been kind of it could be sort of normal, but then again, it's, you need those moments of human interaction to actually balance your life a little bit. So of course, for me, it's been mostly how do we transfer a physical world into a virtual realm and keep especially at the North State Symphony, our audiences engaged while we are unable to be within 6 feet or even a few miles of them. So that's been the biggest challenge. And I cannot emphasize enough how much I can't wait to be back in the concert hall.
We hear you. We feel your pain with all of our theater events shuttered and other events and festivals in the community. So we're absolutely right. Andrew, how about you? I know you're keeping busy at home in your new home, and
alcohol helps. I believe it was Hillary Clinton who said Chardonnay helps and long walks, and both of those are true. I've enjoyed the fact that it's sort of forced us all to slow down, in a way that before at breakfast, I didn't really notice the Cardinals or Blue Jays flying overhead as much, putting in a bird feeder, the hummingbirds, and, I didn't even know the difference between annuals and perennials, don't tell Abby, until the spring. And having the ability to go outside and get my hands dirty, I didn't get a manicure for 3 months. So the ability to get my hands dirty and figure out, water softeners and saltwater pellets and staining and sealing. And, we've got this big hill out back, and how am I going to get the push mower up it? Oh no, let's figure this out. But also violinistically, to take some time to go through works that either I haven't done often or done at all. So I've got my pianist in town, and Liz and I go through works that we haven't really done together, if at all. Tomorrow is an early Mozart sonata and the Fauré sonata. I'm learning a couple of the early Mozart concertos, Vieuxtemps concerto, Viotti 22nd, trying to get through some of the repertoire that, especially composers from the LGBT canon and Black composers of yesteryear and today. Certainly now is the relevant time.
So interesting you mentioned that. Now, does your accompanist come to the house?
No, I'll actually go to her house where it's a little more socially distant, with the screens and doors.
You are together, so yeah, okay. Yeah. I'm amazed at some of the stuff that I see being put together, like Eric Whitaker doing his choirs with thousands of people around the world, and I don't know what the technical part of putting that together must be, but it's got to be overwhelming. So, okay, so you're doing that in person, which is great. You mentioned some of these unexplored composers, and my son's a composer, music educator back in Washington, D.C., and he's been posting on Instagram this series of all these incredible Black composers and musicians, and I'm listening to some of this work, and I thought I was a pretty knowledgeable guy about some of this stuff for a non-musician. It is phenomenal, to your point, exploring some of that work that.
So if I had to throw out one recording I think everybody should listen to right now, I'm so intrigued by this record that Rachel Barton Pine, a wonderful violinist, did back in the 90s called Violin Concertos by Black Composers. And one is the composer Jose White, whose music, I don't want to make the sound, like he's reductive, but it sort of sounds a little bit like Paganini or Vignacci. It's a real showpiece for the violin and orchestra in the delicious key of F sharp minor. And that's been on my rotation quite a bit recently. Of course, I just put out an edition of the Claudio Brindisi di Salas Constellation, who is an Afro-Cuban composer. And I think we all can do more and should do more, but it's a good introduction for me to this canon.
Oh, I love it. So making good use of the time. I listened into an interview with an actor the other day. It was put on by the African-American Shakespeare Company out of San Francisco, actor named Coleman Santiago, who's an amazing guy. In fact, I just watched Selma again last night. He's in Selma playing Ralph Abernathy. But it turns out Mr. Santiago is also a composer, loves musical theater. He's working on musical theater pieces, just a basic Renaissance kind of guy. But he talked about how just the first month during the pandemic, he was just sort of not working on any particular project, reading some books he wouldn't ordinarily look at. He's a big architecture enthusiast. He says, I'm just sort of filling up, filling myself back up for whatever may come in the future. And just that was a powerful message. So like many of the things you're doing, whether it's outdoors and hiking or working on new repertoire, and just all your domestic goddess activities in the new home, and
I'm not the domestic goddess inside. I'll tell you
that.
that.
You're not cooking yet, though, right?
No.
Well, okay, we can get you a master's class online for that.
But my husband has turned out several spectacular salmon dinners. The breakfasts are always good. And following this interview, we're doing Taco Tuesday.
Oh, beautiful! Of course. That's huge here. That really is
which is one of Scott's favorite meals.
Taco Tuesdays. I love it. Well, you all are, as we know, as we've discussed, it's hard everywhere. They are, business community, everybody's affected. Arts community has just been totally whacked, particularly live performance, musicians and venues, and we've certainly felt the impact. And you do your job by traveling, whether it's cross state or cross country or running up to Alaska or Australia. And gosh, it's just got to be brutal emotionally. Let alone financially and spiritually. Any coping mechanisms? You've mentioned a couple of things, but besides wine,
This is the first time in as long as I can remember, since starting college, that I haven't actually left the state of Ohio in 4 months.
Wow.
I went to a Pittsburgh Symphony concert in early March, and that was the last time I left Ohio, whereas I typically travel about 200 days a year. So it really is sort of a forced, incarceration in your hometown.
Boy. So for others, for non-musicians, what do you think about music and the performing arts and arts in general for other people today in our pandemic world with all the social unrest? And how do you see art in that environment?
More important than ever, certainly. Now is the time, along with all of this personal reflection that we're doing. Now is the time for especially ensemble leaders, arts leaders, anyone who leads any organization with an artistic product, especially, to try to figure out how you can more reflect the times that we live in. And that means so many different things to so many different people. And I for us at North State, we are constantly figuring out ways to tap into all of our different branches of our audience. And now is certainly a time to reflect on what we've done, where we are, and how we can adapt in the future, especially given all of the incredible new things that we're forced to discover along the way in the past several months, and how we can push all this together and not create a new normal, but create a better life for all of us. And then there's no one solution, I'm sure, but I think as long as we don't give up and we don't become static, that we can get closer to where we want to be.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Well, it's almost like a parallel universe, these virtual platforms that we've transitioned to. And Scott, I love what you've been doing with North State Symphony, with your interviews on Just Ask and musicians' accents and the watch parties. Just having that content, staying engaged with your community, and maybe engaging some folks that, can't come out to a concert or have never paid any attention, but they fumble upon what you're doing, scrolling through Facebook or whatever. It's been interesting for us. I know there is an upside, not our favorite, but.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate the fact that we have been able to engage not just more people, but different people who, with our mission, as an organization, we're always like, our goal is to make sure everyone in our town knows that they have a professional symphony orchestra. And, this is one of the ways, is to create more online options, because we live in a digital age now, and we need to address that, there's a huge audience out there that we've done very little to accommodate. So now is the time to do that. And I know a lot of people out there, myself included, and, we have concerns that, well, if you're online, what's to keep someone in Chico from just going to, Berlin Philharmonic website and seeing a concert that they're doing? Arguably, yes, they are the best orchestra in the world, but what they're missing is that, the North Sea Symphony is your family. We are your musicians. We are presenting the world of Chico and Reading and the North State through a musical language, and that's what's important to us, is maintaining these these close relationships, these connections. And I think that's what we don't have to be worried about, is that even if we're not in the concert hall, we still have a family, and we will still be connected. And I don't think we can worry too much about that. We're more than welcome to see all these other things, but I don't think we will let go of, it's like, well, if my mom was, on, only available on, Instagram or something, and I couldn't see her, would I talk to someone else who's close to me? No, of course she's my mom. There's that relationship. And I think we have to trust that these are going to continue, even if a large majority of what we do is going to be online.
I really like that characterization. That's I know, that's absolutely, that's just so perfect, so true. So Berlin Philharmonic is still considered the hottest band in the world. I mean,
well, I'm sure that's personal opinion for a lot. I mean,
I know, but I'm just curious. I know they've always been right up there, and
I have always loved.
I'll let someone else challenge you. I'm not qualified to challenge. I'm just curious,
Well, I've been to several live concerts of Berlin, and and let's backtrack to my first concert that I saw with them. A concert of music from a composer that before that concert I did not like.
I'm guessing it's Sibelius.
No, and the composer I'm talking about is Haydn. I mean,
yeah.
For me, now
I've got Haydn on my shirt here somewhere. I can't remember which one. He's here though. Yeah.
But it's music that, if really done well, if you really extract all the stuff that's not on the page, then it becomes more than just elevator music for me.
Yeah.
Then it becomes alive. And watching them do it, they treat any composer, any piece this way, but the way that they move together, how organic they are, how in tune the fifth bassist is to the second flute, all these micro connections within the orchestra, it's just amazing. And whenever I work with an orchestra on a long-term basis, this is the mindset that I strive, this chamber music mentality where everyone has this inner energy and is aware of what everyone else is doing. So yeah, they're phenomenal musicians, but of course there's, Concertgebouw, there's Chicago Symphony, Andrew, of course there's Cleveland Orchestra. I mean, all these wonderful orchestras that do so many different things well. But for me, it's just Berlin has always done something extra. And
who conducted the Haydn when you heard them?
Simon Rattle.
Was Simon Rattle? Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. And Andrew, how do you pronounce your conductor? Is it Muscht?
Franz Welser Most.
Most.
Yeah.
Most? Okay, I was trying to make it too fancy.
I'm sure there's a more nuanced way, but you're asking an Ohioan to pronounce.
Oh, okay. Well, you probably hear his name more often than I do. I'm a little behind, but I grew up in Zubin Mehta's L.A., and then we transitioned to Carlo Maria Giulini, and then I moved to Washington D.C. and Mstislav Rostropovich was in charge, and
wow, yeah.
After that, so I love hearing that. That was a fab. I mean, it's interesting. In my world, I guess I can relate Shakespeare maybe, and some of the either plays or characters I didn't pay much attention to, but in the hands of a master actor or actress, suddenly you go, oh my gosh, that's what that part's about. Okay,
exactly. Yeah.
So that makes it accessible to me, a non-musician. So you're both professional musicians. You made a career of it. You're all over the map performing with various ensembles. But tell us a story about when and where you first met and performed together. And I do want to hear the story about something about throwing a baton into the violin section.
Well, I met Scott about actually a little over a decade ago when he was living in Ohio. And I saw him conduct a wonderful Dvorak 8th Symphony. And I said, conductor about my age, though he's a little bit older. And let's go out to a bar and get some Long Island's and catch up.
Yeah.
And we started working together almost immediately. I think Scott had some trust towards me from the beginning, and we went to Toronto. I remember the phone call I got, actually. I was playing a recital in Kitchener-Waterloo, and Scott called me and said, the Mozart concertos, which do you want to do in Toronto in 3 months? I said, well, let's do the Turkish. And from there, that was a decade ago, actually. And we've done Mozart, Mendelssohn, Sibelius, Bruch, Beethoven Triple, Tchaikovsky. I'm sure I'm leaving something out. Mozart 5 a couple of times, the Mendelssohn a couple of different places. And I always learn from Scott, every conductor, you have to get used to their quirks and their own rhythm and their own ictus with the stick. And Scott was like working within a Rolls Royce. I always knew that he could navigate my twists and turns and every trill I throw his way. So it's been a really fun ride. And, I'm very grateful as a concert violinist to have a conductor who wants to keep bringing me places, because that means work for me.
Oh, there's that Toronto concert.
Hey, wonderful.
Yes.
Ah, yes.
That's a great night.
Yeah, and that hall in Toronto is one of the best that I'm sure we both have ever performed in.
Really?
And there was Mozart in South Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
Is that where you went on the racetrack? You went down to the BMW factory?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm a fan of BMW. And funny story about this. We were there, and our instructor was like, "So what do you drive, Andrew?" He's like, "Mercedes." I'm like, "Oh, man."
You're 30 years too young.
Spartanburg has that. Is it Spartanburg?
Yeah, it's the BMW factory is right outside of Spartanburg.
I used to go down there calling on various clients, and I went to the factory, and it's feels like it's miles long.
It's a huge complex.
Yeah.
There's Johnstown, Pennsylvania, where we did a really fun Mendelssohn concerto, and nothing was open after the concert, so we had Appletinis and Papa John's delivered to the hotel.
I love that. I love it. So what about the baton into the section?
That was the Scottish Fantasy at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, this has happened many times, actually.
That's part of your origin story or something. So sorry if
I don't know that has ever happened with Andrew. I'm not sure. But so my first decade of conducting, I exclusively used one brand of baton, and I won't say which, but this baton was so good at first, and then they just started breaking because the original maker had died, and then the quality wasn't quite as high when they tried to reproduce what he had done. And so I started breaking these batons left and right, and this one particular time, for example, I was conducting the Cincinnati Symphony, and no less than the Rite of Spring, the sacrificial dance at the very end, baton, my favorite piece, I get into it, and the baton hit the music stand, the end broke off and hit a violist, the principal violist, in the eye. I was like, oh God.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, there you go. That kind of energy.
That was the face, yes.
I never thought of that. I think about baseball bats breaking, but the baton actually, really, you hit the podium and there it went. Oh my gosh, that's frightening.
Yeah, and same piece even. My audition for my doctoral program at the University of Montreal, I was conducting, again, the sacrificial dance in the Rite of Spring. I got so into it that I stabbed my hand, and I was actually profusely bleeding during the end of the piece, and I won the audition. So that was good.
Oh, giving blood for your art.
David, you didn't realize that this was a contact sport.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing that. So so you're working professionals, but before that, when does a young person decide they want to be a professional musician? And
well, for me, it took a while. I wanted to be a police officer. I wanted to be shortstop for the Cleveland Indians. I rode my bike up and down our suburban street, imitating the siren with my mouth. It drove my mother crazy because I wanted to be a firefighter. I wanted to be a Secret Service agent, wear a smart suit with a little, revolver in it. And then I went to the Interlochen Center for the Arts, and I heard some students there that were spectacular. And I remember thinking, how are they so good?
Do you have to apply to get into Interlochen? Is it a big deal? I mean, it's way the hell up there in Michigan.
It sure was a big deal for me. I sent in a tape. I was 11 years old, and I recorded a Vivaldi concerto.
Wow.
on a tape recorder. So for anyone listening, now I'm aging myself a little bit.
Cassettes.
A little cassette tape, yep.
Oh, yeah.
And I went up there, and the first summer that I was up there, Josh Groban was a student, a few years older than me. Sarah Chang was there playing the Tchaikovsky Concerto in a way that I had never heard before. And there were 2,000 kids, artists, dancers, musicians, you know, writers. It was tremendous. I was there 3 summers. And these 2,000 kids that came across the campus every summer that all had something to offer. I had never been before, with the exception of my youth orchestra every Saturday morning. I'd never been somewhere where we all had that immediate bond. You know, you don't have to be the same age or look like them or even speak their language, but with music, in the back of Kresge Auditorium at Interlaken, it says, music is the universal language. And it truly is. You know, when you're watching the World Youth Symphony Orchestra play, you realize that it really is a universal language. And shockingly, I did not meet Scott there because I believe we were there 1 year apart, right, Scott?
I worked there in 2001 and 2002. I think, yeah, we established that it was pretty close because you were when?
97, 98, and 2000.
Okay, so yeah, 1 year before.
Oh, wow.
But yeah.
And what about you, Scott? I mean, where did it kick in for you? Like music as a life and career? And
I imagine that I wanted to do as many things as any little kid, you know, just discovering life, you know, goes through. I remember wanting to be a pilot. I remember wanting to be a marine biologist. I remember wanting to be a professional baseball player. I remember when I started to get more serious and, you know, further into high school, for example, you know, I love 2 areas. I love music and I love math. And so when I went to Vanderbilt, I majored in music and math. I mean, there was no second thought, no, like, what am I going to do with my life? I just didn't care. I love music and math. I was going to study music and math. And so I tried to do it all, so to speak. You know, I was practicing my saxophone, you know, 4 to 7 hours a day. I was studying conducting on the side because you can't, you know, officially study conducting as an undergraduate, save Curtis and maybe one other place.
Okay.
And then I was doing math at Vanderbilt, which is not an easy thing to do. And it got to the point at the end of my sophomore year, and I was 2 classes away from having my double major in math, from finishing it because I came in with a lot of credits already. And I wasn't sleeping. I was doing things all the time. I was stressed out. I had bags under my eyes, and it became too much. And so I had called every professional musician that I ever came in contact with. Like, you know, you've worked with me a little bit. Do I have what it takes to be a musician? And, you know, despite what anyone told me, you know, and of course they said, oh, of course, you know, if you want to, go for it. But I eventually came to a realization that, you know, I couldn't imagine myself, you know, sitting in an office for 8 hours a day doing something, you know, either actuarial work or something else. And you know, when I was in high school doing calculus, I imagined myself, you know, working in an FBI crime lab, determining like times of death, you know, taking all these cool elements. And because that's what we did in calculus, is all this really cool side of mathematics, and it really drew me in. But, you know, of course, I wanted to be a conductor at that point. So that stuck, and I exclusively focused myself to becoming, you know, the best possible musician and eventually conductor that I could be. And so that's what happened to that. You know, I still love numbers. I read books about numbers all the time, and I'm still one of my sort of second professions. You know, I deal with math on a regular basis, so it hasn't left me. But I'm glad that music and conducting and being a professional musician stuck with me, because there's no work involved in doing something you love. I'm sure you know that, you hear that all the time, but it's really true.
Sure.
You know, and we talk about, you know, being a music director of an orchestra, you know, it's like 10% conducting and 90% everything else.
Yeah.
But you come to love those things along the way, because that everything else is talking to people about music and getting them as excited as you are about music. And really, what better profession could there be than getting someone as excited about something as you? And I haven't really looked back. I can't imagine doing anything else.
No, it's fabulous. As someone once told me, don't get good at doing something you don't like to do. I've always appreciated that sentiment, and you're obviously a great practitioner. And you're right, it is. And then to some extent, it becomes like a marketing gig, selling a product you love that you're so passionate about, and all that preparation for that 10% of you being up there and making everybody in the orchestra look good and sound good, right?
Yeah.
We have fun together, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, and that joy really comes through. So, this is so fun. So we heard a little bit about your formal training, Vanderbilt, New England Conservatory, and Montreal.
Right.
Andrew, where did you train? I'm not sure I know.
So I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and down the street was the venerable Cleveland Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, my mother and my grandparents deemed it important enough for me to go to the orchestra as often as I could. My grandparents held season tickets for 40 years, and they used to be in the chorus under Robert Shaw.
Oh,
and
wow.
I remember being 8, 9, 10, 11 and seeing these tremendous soloists and conductors traipse across the stage, Manny Axe and Gil Shaham in his debut, and Midori as a 20-year-old. Itzhak Kroman, of course, several times, Josh Bell, and Sophie Mutter, who remains the favorite. And I very quickly became kind of critical and kind of reviewing in my head how I thought the concert went, and then pairing it with a review the next day, or talking with my violin teacher about the concert I just heard. And I very quickly discovered what I liked and what I didn't. And so in a way, that was a great education. I went to the Cleveland Institute of Music for undergraduate years, and then I went to Southern Methodist University in their artist diploma program. But really, my greatest education is either with my 4 private teachers that I consider to be my real influences, or being on the road. Because let me tell you, that first year that I was really on the road, I can remember that first year I must have been on the road 35 weeks a year, and I had a dozen different violin concerti. And flying across the country and rehearsing that day with the concerto that you're only doing once that year, and 2 days after a different concerto, you learn very quickly what you can and cannot do, and what your routine should and shouldn't be.
Boy, well, that's like being an endurance athlete on the violin. It's like, no. And I know you have a very, very strong work ethic, even here the last time you were with us, and did a couple of workshops for some local at-risk youth. I mean, and then you were doing, of course, Brahms in the brothel. We'll talk about that later, but that special event. Yeah, you missed that one, Scott.
I don't believe that anybody needs to work 16 hours a day at something, but I am pretty regimented. As Scott can attest, I do want to carve out the things in the day that are important to me, whether that's outreach, the solo practice I need to do, the time alone to get into my head and my mind space before rehearsal or the concert, and of course the social aspects. I'm an extrovert. I'm a Gemini. I love going to a restaurant or bar. That was probably the biggest travesty for me about COVID, is I feel at home sitting at a bar having a meal and drinking a martini.
Your native habitat,
Absolutely. And it's all about how you structure your day to feel as presentable and to feel good. You can't go on stage not feeling good about how you sound or how you look or your health or your relationship with the orchestra or conductor, which cannot be underestimated.
Incredible. So what about today? You've talked about how you both trained and some of the folks you've worked with or were inspired by. What about today? Any current inspirations? Any young up and coming violinists or conductors that or just folks out there that are working professionals that really still fire you up and you go, oh my gosh,
Well, we are so blessed to be in an industry where there's so many talented violinists. I've never once thought that I never compared myself to anybody else in career or repertoire or tempi or playing faster or louder or softer or slower. but I'm constantly inspired. And, I'll send Scott links of various violinists playing fill in the blank concerto. And as I said, I quickly learned what I liked and what I didn't like. But, some of those constants, of course, David Oistrakh and that robust sound he used to have.
Yeah.
And Julia Fischer and her elegance and purity. And Sophie Mutter can never fail to get a chuckle or that sound, And
I heard her in Washington, D.C. a couple of times, yeah.
And so I'm constantly inspired. I was roommates with the tremendous violin soloist at a festival about 15 years ago, and listening to him practice every day and hearing those scales. I mean, it's you get to have fun with somebody. You have some beer, and then you see them immediately the next morning go right back to work, because the only thing that people will remember really afterwards is how you made them feel during the concert and how you sounded.
How about you, Scott, in the conducting world? Who do you admire these days, or from today, or in the past? Or
I mean, I've always had my set of favorite conductors, and it's hard to narrow it down to any one or two people, but I always appreciate it when I see these people that just exude the music, and that every little gesture, going back to like the Seiji Ozawas, where even the pinky had meaning, to finding people that can really embody that, and from the Bernstein look of an eye to a fingertip, to just how absorbed one can be in the music. And I mentioned Simon Rattle with Berlin, and he's not there anymore, but their new conductor, Kirill Petrenko, just an amazing talent. And there's so much amazing conducting talent out there nowadays, and a lot of it is newer sort of orchestras taking chances on younger conductors, and a lot of them turn out great, and some have a little ways to go. But it's really interesting watching the dynamic of the world of conducting and how it constantly evolves. And one thing's for certain out of all of this, the older you get, that's I was listening to one of my great mentors, Michael Morgan, and he's talking about how he didn't really feel like he could do anything until I think it was age 50. Like once you hit age 50, that's when you don't care anymore. It's like you can do it. Like there's no thinking about how to do something. It's just you're there and you make it happen. And it's just so yeah, there's all kinds of amazing talent out there. I've certainly appreciated all of the amazing mentorship that I've received along my nearly 2 decades of conducting now. So
I was going to say, Scott, when do you turn 50?
Fortunately, I have a ways to go, but
I've enjoyed again, just from my amateur perspective, but I've enjoyed watching Gustavo Dudamel, of course, my old hometown, Los Angeles, and just we were talking about engagement and getting people interested that might have never tuned in before, and I think he's done a lot in that regard. And again, he seems like a pretty competent conductor to me. I've only heard him live once over at UC Davis. We're not far from there, just north of Sacramento here at their Mondavi Center, Jackson Hall, and did I think he did Mahler's second. It was pretty spectacular, and just enjoyed him. But what about women in the field? I mean, I love Maren Alsop. Of course, she's now retiring from the Baltimore Symphony, I heard, and I saw her perform a number of times. My son went to the Peabody Conservatory at Johns Hopkins, and they did some collaborative projects with Maren and the BSO. And any other women on this conducting scene?
Women in terms of conducting have come a long way, and it's certainly I feel like there are much less barriers in place for them now. So I'm happy to see a lot of my colleagues who have enormous talent be able to actually do the things that their male counterparts are able to do, probably still a little bit more easily in terms of making it both sides equal. But it's definitely been a lot of progress in at least the past decade or two. And of course, Maren Alsop was a tremendous force paving the way for a lot of that, especially for young female conductors. But yeah, I mean, there's no particular name that comes to mind, but there are a lot more of them now than there were when I started in the professional world.
Good. That's good to hear. So they're in the pipeline, and some will emerge, and we'll look forward to hearing them conduct.
Yeah, they're at least receiving, you know, more of an equal playing field than they have, and hopefully that continues to be, you know, much less of an issue now.
Great. Talk for a minute about some of your each of you your favorite composers, orchestral, violin composers. You know, what composers do you enjoy, not just in terms of, I guess, the audience experience, but, you know, when you're working with a score, I mean, what really gets you going here? And
well, this might surprise you, but one of my very, very favorite composers to play,
Vivaldi, right?
is Mozart. It's absolutely Mozart, because, and I never would have answered that at age 14.
Well, what's the joke? I don't get it.
It's an inside thing. I know Andrew very, very well. Okay. And he is a quintessential romantic violinist. Let's just leave it there.
Absolutely. there's no argument there. But there's something about going through, and there's so much that Mozart wrote that I probably still will never play. You know, many symphonies and string quartets and early sonatas. But even going through this sonata tomorrow with my pianist, that is unfamiliar to me, I'm learning so much about, well, myself as a musician, how to be the most elegant person I can. And, you know, Scott and I have done the Mozart Fifth Concerto a handful of times, but some of the other works, it really shapes you in a way. I used to think I had the last word on Tchaikovsky until I started going to his ballets. And then I realized, you know, it's not as syrupy sweet and as rich chocolate molten cake as I used to think. You know, you go and you see Swan Lake or the Nutcracker, and it is really looking back towards Schubert rather than looking ahead towards Shostakovich.
I like it.
You know, Bach is, of course, inspirational, though I rarely play him in public.
Why is that? I think I heard you mention that on another interview. Because the sonatas and partitas are one of my favorites. But, I mean, what's the deal?
You know, it's one of those situations where if you're a Shakespearean actor, you might not do 50 Shades of Grey. And if you're in 50 Shades of Grey, you might not do Shakespeare. It's one of those I just think that I need to personally feel more comfortable with. And that might be something in a future chapter of my life that I'll really put a stamp on it. But right now, it's
maybe
the romantic.
Maybe when you're 50.
Oh, well, that's eons from now. But, you know, the romantic chamber music literature, the piano trio literature, especially by Brahms, Beethoven, Mendelssohn, Tchaikovsky, Dvorak, and the violin concertos, that's my bread and butter right now.
Great. What about you, Scott? What do you like working through? What do you connect with when you're working on a score?
You know, we're talking about Bach, and Bach is something that, you know, especially considering that my background, you know, began in saxophone, that it's something that has been harder to get into or really invest myself in. But it's something that I think is necessary for any musician, especially to really discover who they are, you know, musically, to really take something that can be done an infinite amount of ways, to be interpreted so, you know, vastly different from one great violinist to another, or one great cellist to another, and really take it and make it your own. But it's not just your own. It's the basis for all that we do as a professional musician, because you have to put the work in, you have to do the research, you have to see what's been done, you have to formulate your own grasp on what you believe it is. And Bach is like that, I think, for all of us. And so I would love to get more into it, because there's so much incredible things, especially in my in the transcriptions of the cello suites that I've played, and the way that these harmonic lines are so long and these pedals move, and then all this incredible stuff moves on top of it. Just these moments are almost mathematical, to the point of Bartók precision, and speaking of like golden ratios, and just the way that it's all constructed, and the perfect architecture. Yeah, exactly. And so Bach is something that I've been trying to invest myself in. It's like, you know, I'm going to read 10 pages a day. It's that same idea, as you have to invest yourself in it. And I think that's, you know, what I'm trying to do. But as far as, you know, favorite composers, I've always been a huge Sibelius, you know, guy. I remember, and I tell this story a lot when I talk about Sibelius, but I remember when I first heard Sibelius, and I was living in Lexington, Kentucky, and it was like 2 a.m.
Yeah.
It was like 2 a.m. one day, and I was listening to this weird piece, the Sibelius Fifth Symphony, and I was like, all right, this is kind of neat. You know, these really broad textural linear things. And then all of a sudden it got to the end of this 35-minute piece, and then shunk, shunk, shunk.
Really?
Shunk, shunk. It's so bizarre. And I was like, what did I just listen to? And so I think that planted the seed for my interest in this particular composer. And it helped that when I studied in Montreal, my main teacher there, Jean-Francois Rivet, was a huge Sibelius freak. You know, even had a portrait of Sibelius when he was an old guy in his office. You know, the anger and the you know, just backing away from humanity. You could see it in his eyes. And then we had these great conversations about who he was. You know, he just a fascinating personality. How you could be in mid conversation with him, and then he would just walk away and do something else. That's in his works, and like how he just imprinted himself. How, you know, he went through his phases like Tchaikovsky and Wagner, but then he really discovered and created these amazing bodies of symphonies, and of course his violin concerto is just phenomenal. Andrew and I just did that, you know, what, 3 years ago, and
wow,
you know, there's no other thing like it. How it's the most organic symphonic music for me. How it takes the rules and then in a very Beethoven way breaks the rules, but in a very different way. It's such great stuff.
Oh, obviously a strong, very strong connection there. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Powerful stuff. To back up just for a moment, though, you made a comment about the Bach cello suites, a transcription you were working on. What kind of a transcription?
Oh, these are already exist. You know, I played these when I was, you know, a bachelor's and master's student. But you know, saxophone was invented way later than Bach. So
you're talking a cello suite on saxophone?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that what you meant? Okay, that's what I thought you meant. I'm intrigued.
I've played several of the suites for like recitals and things like that. I think the first one I did was the second suite. You know, and just discovering Bach as a saxophone is like, you know, what is this? Because most of the music that's written for saxophone now, especially when I was a master's student at NEC, it's a combination of everything, and it's mostly, you know, new music that takes, you know, jazz and classical, and it sort of throws them against a wall together, and you sort of play what comes off dripping down on the other side. So that's the world of saxophone. But to really get into something like Bach is a truly special experience.
I'm going to look up a cello concerto on sax. That's that's fun. Oh gosh, I'm watching the clock here. I got to keep moving, folks. We're just getting warmed up, I think. So any violin concertos, Andrew, that you haven't done that you're just desperate to perform someday, or what's on your wish list?
Sure. You know, Shostakovich is one. Okay. The Prokofiev Second Concerto is one. I just recently did John Corigliano's The Red Violin, which is tremendous music.
Oh, yeah.
Very evocative. I'm a big fan of works that aren't really part of the standard fare. Like, as I mentioned, the Jose White Concerto. Joseph Joachim's Hungarian Concerto is one I'm begging conductors to do. Even going to the showpiece works like Vuitton and Viatti. Some of the lesser-known Mozart concertos, the earlier ones. You know, there's a lot out there. I think I've done every major romantic concerto, but there are a number of concertos that come later in the 20th century, maybe starting with Glazunov, Prokofiev, Bartok, that I just have not done yet with orchestra.
So there's plenty of repertoire left to keep you entertained.
Sure. But if I don't feel strongly about the piece, I'm at the stage of my life, you know, at 23, if somebody said, can you do the Arensky 74th Concerto in G flat? Well, of course. But now I really have to feel some kind of connection, because you don't want to half-ass it out there.
Have you turned down any gigs? You go, I really don't like that music and I don't want to play.
Or I don't think I'm the right soloist for it. You know, I had a conductor ask me about the Bartok First Concerto, and I said, I'm not your guy.
Okay.
I'm not your guy.
All right. That's certainly fair and more than honest. So Andrew, what if you could play another instrument, what would it be?
Oh, I'm a closeted cellist.
Oh.
And maybe that's why I enjoy the piano trio literature so much, is because I get to sit right next to a cellist. And gosh, the cellist in my trio, John Waltz, there's nobody quite like him. But to hear that, it's, first of all, it's a pretty erotic instrument. It's between your legs, it's connected to the floor and to your body.
Right.
And so it really resonates in all kinds of ways. And it's got the biggest range of the string instruments. And so you can do, the slow baritone stuff and all the way up to soprano. And I've always been very intrigued. I also am kind of a closet Broadway star, except I can't sing or dance. So there's that. And of course, I could have been a pop star if I could, sing and dance.
I know you guys were supposed to. Who were you supposed to see this week? You were going to go see, or sometime in June.
Bon Jovi.
You were going to go see Bon Jovi. That's right.
We can go today. Yes.
Oh man, doesn't that feel?
Yeah.
Oh, so Scott, one more thing I wanted to ask you about. Are you also artistic director of the North State Symphony? Is that right? You're not just the conductor.
Right.
So I assume there's probably other folks that have a voice in the matter. But when you put together a season, what is that like? I know, like here, our local theater company, just to dumb it down, our dear friends at the acting company. I mean, they can do some slightly edgy stuff once in a while, 2-person shows, but of course the bread and butter are the big musicals. So they do Hello Dolly and Sell It Out. You do Mary Poppins, and you're making bank on that. So in the classical music world, putting together a season, I mean, it's got to be a little art, a little bit of science, a little bit of finance. What goes into the process?
Because it is, because the symphony is in existence to serve our communities, I think it's important to give voice to the communities. And so I'm always talking with people, what would you like to see on concerts, from our board, our staff. We have sessions with community members. We have private conversations. I take all of this input and I try to, put this puzzle together in the most constructive way that has a little bit of something for everyone, for every season. And of course, for any season, you have to have, from a marketing standpoint, you have to have something that will get butts in seats. That's you can't make music. If a tree falls in the forest, does it make noise? that whole idea. So you have to have programming that people are going to come see. But the thing is, we're talking about being a voice for the world around us. It's so important to promote and champion composers, living composers, and new music, and to get that message across to people who don't necessarily agree with you. And there's a lot of them. So it's building that relationship with your audience, with your patrons, and saying, okay, of course, here's Beethoven 5. We all love it. Here's a piece that's next to it. You don't know it, but you're going to like it, and here's why. So as long as you can have this conversation with them, as long as they are open to hearing what you say, then hopefully you can, get them to hear it at the very least, and then after it, have a conversation of why you liked it or why you didn't like it, and then take that information and then construct the next season. As long as they're part of the process, I think that the programming isn't the most important thing. Yeah. I think it's if you can engage them and make them included and like they have ownership in the artistic product, then you can program anything. And we, like I said before, we are trying to program things that are relevant, that tell the story of the world we're living in. I think that's probably one of the most important things right now.
Oh, that's great. I totally agree. And I think it's that trust factor too. The folks in the community know you, and they're going, all right, I'll play along with this guy. What the heck is this piece on the program? Yeah, all right, I'll give it a whirl. I'll support the orchestra and go out and you walk away from those experiences and you're like a new person. I've had that many times. Growing up in LA, going to the Hollywood Bowl, I'd always go to hear the, Host Planets with the choir out in the parking lot when they come in and right. It was and there'd always be something else on the program that took me into a whole new area. So,
and nowadays the choir might have to be in the parking lot. So.
Right, social distancing before it was required.
Yeah.
Oh, we could go on forever and ever, but I just wanted to ask you one last question before we do our final 10 questions. Scott, you go first. What's your favorite place to perform? Have you had a favorite concert hall? You've mentioned acoustics at some of the places you've played. Anyone that just really stands out?
That is a great question.
For any reason, it doesn't have to be acoustics.
I don't think I've had a favorite place that I perform, but when you have the combination of orchestra, conductor, soloist, and audience, like that, where everything clicks, and you can feel that everyone is feeling this energy that starts with somewhere inside the conductor, goes through the orchestra, and then affects the person sitting in the very back of the hall. You know, that magic, of course, is the ideal for every single performance, but when it truly sustains through the entire concert, I don't think it really matters what hall it happens in, but when that perfect blend of an excited, curious orchestra with an engaging soloist, with an ensemble that is telling, like I said, this story of something. And then people understand, who are all sitting there paying money to engage with you. When all of that happens, I remember those concerts.
Wow,
you know, like I said, you wish every concert was that way. But sometimes, you know, you just feel this concert's special, and you can't exactly explain why sometimes, but it's those that you remember more than others.
Oh, that's so powerful. I've heard that from actors. I don't think I've ever heard it from musicians, particularly musicians involved in something as big as a whole symphony performance. So that's magical. Andrew, any favorite places you performed?
I would echo everything Scott said. That was actually my initial thought, was when you've got that perfect concoction, perfect equation where it's going well. But adding on to that, anywhere with a good beach.
With a good beach, okay. Did I read that you actually performed in Trinidad and Tobago?
Oh, yes.
You've been there, wow.
Yeah, I've performed in about a dozen different islands around the Caribbean. It's one of my very favorite things to do.
Oh, how fun, how fun. I thought you were going to say playing here in Marysville, in the upstairs, the old-time brothel at the Silver Dollar.
Well, let me tell you, that was probably the most unique dressing room I've ever had, because I had my share of 1840s outfits and scarves and hats, and I'm not sure what opium or what activities took place on the fainting couch in that dressing room, but it was certainly unique, and I was grateful to play there.
Oh, it was so much fun. What a great day out teaching in the schools and then having that sold out concert, very intimate environment. There's one of the ladies from the upstairs at the Silver Dollar. That's our good friend, Courtney Finstad. She's marketing director at Peachtree Country Club. So.
Hi, Courtney.
Oh, goodness. Oh, that's so much fun. Well, we could go on forever and ever, but
David, let me add one more thing, if I may, and I think Andrew will back me up on this. But in addition to the scenario I just described, I think Andrew and I will agree that especially some of our favorite times together are when we visit schools together. And this is so special, especially when it's a really young audience, especially when, we're talking to like second, third graders, fifth, anywhere in the sort of the elementary school range. And when you finally get their attention and you can see in their eyes something sort of just like changes for them, that's a truly special day when you know that you have possibly incorporated music into someone's life forever.
Yes.
That's very powerful. When Andrew was here last, we were dealing with some somewhat hardened high school age at-risk youth, but even there, you made the connection, just asking them what they were listening to and you're so up on all the pop stuff and even some of the country stuff. And they're throwing little, bombshells at him. He handled them, hit them right back. But that younger audience, we felt that with some of our other arts and education programs. So that arts engagement piece, and through music, what better medium? So, so powerful. Can we do one quick thing before we ask these last questions? Just because I just learned about this, I may have heard about it earlier, but can we talk about the Firebird Scream? Speaking of a virtual world and things going viral, I think Alex has the video queued up, but if you want to talk about it,
sure,
introduce it from the Stravinsky. Yeah.
So in November 2017, just some concert that I had my camera set up, trying to critique myself and see what I was doing. Just happens to be the time that we're playing Stravinsky's Firebird Suite, and there's a moment, if you don't know the score, that it goes from just everything just dies away, and the texture is timeless and sparse and thin and quiet, and it just diminishes to nothing. This solo clarinet just drifting away. It's like everything in the world is falling asleep. Then all of a sudden, you're slapped in the face by the orchestra with this triple fortissimo hit, and then just this fast, energized music going into the infernal dance, and it's just it's crazy stuff. And I think if for someone to put a visual to it, this piece was in Fantasia, and I think anyone who's seen Fantasia knows that this music represents that scene perfectly. Nope, not that one.
We've got it. He'll find it. It was so fun then watching the video, and this was up on YouTube, and
so I threw it on Facebook at first, and was surprised by how much traction it was getting. So I stuck it on YouTube, and then people just
million views.
How many?
Yeah, well, we're estimating because it was on many different platforms, and I hear that it was very, very popular in places like China and Korea, Australia, somewhere in there, and I think all told is like 70 to 90 million views or something like that. So it's pretty insane how far.
Gentlemen, how do we monetize?
Well, see, that's the thing. I don't think we got
Rolls
to
Royce from it.
I wish.
Well, let's go ahead and ask our Alex, if you find it, pop it up, and then we'll stop, and hopefully we can see the actual audience member reaction. It's pretty hysterical. The last few minutes of the show each week, we ask the same 10 questions of our guests. This whole idea was started by a dear departed James Lipton, who ran the Actors Studio in New York. He typically had actors on, but we found this is translated well, whether you're an actor or visual artist or a musician. So without further ado, here we go. So, Andrew, what's your favorite word?
Epicurean.
And I know you're a practitioner. Scott, yes. Your favorite word?
Oh, geez, my favorite word. Pancakes.
As long as you're not Aunt Jemima, you're good. And Scott, what's your least favorite word?
Declined.
Oh.
No idea why that popped into my head.
I like it. Very spontaneous. Andrew, least favorite word?
Moist.
See, I was tempted to say that, but like, no, let's not go there.
Andrew, what turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Connecting with somebody on any level.
Powerful. Scott?
Well, it's similar. I mean, exhibiting passion.
Very nice. And Scott, what turns you off creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
I shouldn't say this, but Ives.
Sounds like you're speaking from firsthand experience. Andrew, what turns you off creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Pickles, olives, mushrooms, day-old bread, or out-of-tune playing.
See, Andrew, I thought you were mocking me for a second because you know that I hate 3 out of, I would have said pickles, mushrooms, and olives as well. So
Scott,
anyway.
I've had thousands of meals with you. We are pretty similar in what we like.
So what garnish do you like in your martini then, Andrew?
Oh, it's got to be citrus of some kind.
So, yeah, lemon twist or whatever. Okay. I'm with you there. Andrew, what is your favorite word? What is your favorite curse word?
Probably bullocks.
Dang it, Andrew! I was going to say that.
Oh, come on,
Balls.
Scott. What's your favorite curse word?
Well, I seriously was going to say bollocks because it's so correct and something you can get away with on this show. So let's go with bollocks.
Fine, totally fine. Scott, what sound or noise do you love?
What sound or noise do I love? Geez, the sound of poker chips.
Oh, I like that. Andrew, what sound or noise do you love?
A beautiful sports car revving up at the light next to you, or vegetables sizzling in the pan when my husband's getting dinner ready.
Oh, fabulous. So, Andrew, what sound or noise do you hate? Hey, hold that thought. Let's watch the screen. Not to be confused with Edvard Munch. Did you ever identify that person?
We did. We actually did an interview with that person on the local news station, and she stated that she was in a meditative state. So you can take that for what it's worth.
Not sleeping, meditating. Okay. Oh, that's beautiful. Thanks for pulling that up for us, Alex. All right, Andrew. Where were we? What sound or noise do you hate?
Either a scream during a concert or lawn care equipment before 9 o'clock in the morning.
Blowers are the worst. I know, right? Scott, what about you? What sound or noise do you hate?
Well, the first thing that popped in my head, so we recently moved to a place for its peacefulness, and there is a road off in the distance through a forest, and they just installed a rumble strip that is too narrow. Like it actually bleeds over into the actual lane. And so often you hear, and that has become absolutely my least favorite noise in the world now. And I'm actually doing something to get it taken care of, because any interstate that you go on, the rumble strip is at least a foot outside of the line. So I don't know why they did it. Don't know why they did it. But
area. All right, Scott, what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Well, I sort of hinted at this. If I wasn't a musician, I think I would try to find the resources to be a professional poker player.
Oh, not a mathematician. Okay.
Well, in poker, you use plenty of math.
Yeah,
you use plenty of math.
Okay, I like it. Andrew?
And an answer that will come as a surprise to nobody. A restaurateur or a bar owner.
Oh, love it. It'd be fabulous. I'd go there. What profession, Andrew, would you not like to pursue?
MMA wrestling.
Good choice. Andrew, what would you not like to do? I'm sorry,
Scott. Jump out of planes.
Really?
Teach skydiving.
I'm surprised to hear that, because I know you're a ultra marathoner and endurance guy, and that seemed to be kind of. So you're not doing the wing suits or any of that stuff, or parachutes?
No. I say that because my dad recently stopped teaching skydiving. So I had mentioned that earlier in my life I wanted to be a pilot. Well, I'm a very uncomfortable flyer sometimes, so a lot of that dissipated very quickly. So
I had
don't
to hold
know.
his hand from Juneau to Seattle.
Oh, whatever, Andrew. So I can't imagine jumping out of a plane.
I wish I could. Next lifetime, I'm coming back. I'm going to do it, but not this time around. Good for you. All right. And last but not least, Scott, we'll start with you. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Which Mahler symphony would you like to conduct first?
Very nice. And Andrew, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Follow me, Andrew. Your grandparents are this way.
Ah, beautiful. Well, gosh, we went over time. I don't think we'll be fined. It's our show, our channel. Thank you all for making yourself available and overtime. Checks in the mail. Thank you. Thank you. We so appreciate having you both on. We cannot wait to see you live and in person somewhere on some stage, and especially back here in Yuba and Sutter counties. So
thank you.
Well, we'd certainly love to be there.
Soon. Well, we're working on it. We're working on it. I want to thank our technical support team, our producer, Abby Cecina, technical director, Alex Cecina. Next week, Tuesday, June 30th at 4 o'clock, our special guest will be local theater legend and co-founder of the acting company, Miss Pat Hill, and she'll actually be interviewed by our special guest interviewer, Alex Cecina. So until next time, that's it for Artist Alchemy. Don't forget all the other great things going on at YubaSutterArts on Facebook and throughout the community and throughout the world in this new virtual arts place that we find ourselves in. Stay engaged and support the arts and culture any way you can. Until next time.
Wear a mask and wash your hands.
Mask, social distance. Thanks
Absolutely.
a lot. See you next time.
Bye, everyone.